Hi everyone, in this video I talk about top 10 English novels of all time. The best of the best, the cream of the crops. But English I'm in England, so I have excluded novels by Irish authors. Perhaps in a future video I'll do a top 10 Irish and Scottish novels. Okay, England is known to have miserable weather, so what can you do? Two things English people love to do: gardening and sports. Writing novels comes a close, distant third. Okay, first let's look at the top 10 English novels. At the end, I'll tell you two things that is unique about English literature. Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. Jane Austen is the queen of romance in English literature. Pride and Prejudice is the most talked about novel in English language, or most adopted novel on screen. It also has the most famous first line, which tells you the theme of the novel too. It is truth universally acknowledged that a single man in possession of a good fortune must be in want of a wife. What is it about? Set in the English countryside, it's about Elizabeth Bennet, the protagonist of the novel. Very bright but also very judgmental, which makes it harder for her to see through between the apparently good husband material and truly good husband material. She represents prejudice. Mr. Darcy, on the other hand, symbolizes pride. Given his high social status, he is little too direct in his approach and lets pride dictate his encounters with others. So the novel centers on their romantic back and forth. I hate you, I love you, I hate you, I love you. Yes, many leaves are plucked. Finally, Elizabeth and Darcy manage to peel through their prejudice and pride, respectively, to find what truly makes them happy. Pride and Prejudice is more than a romance. It has psychological depth, a comedy of manners, and study of human mating rituals. I personally much prefer darker novels, often with tragic endings. Jane Austen's novels are somewhat formulaic in its courtship maneuverings, in that boys and girls meet, first they hate one another, later they discover something about each other and fall in love and get married. Jane Austen is realistic that money is important. Only men with fortunes are in contention to get married. Her female protagonists always marry up, men of higher status or fortune. Practical and realistic. Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte. The Bronte sisters are extremely unique in world literature. Charlotte, Emily, and Anne were great novelists. Charlotte's Jane Eyre is also an important English novel, but I chose Wuthering Heights to represent the amazing family. It's written in a Gothic style, centered on the wild and dark side of human passion, and perhaps it's Emily Bronte's response to Jane Austen's light romantic tales. What is the story? It's about two land-owning families, but one young man in particular, the untamed and wild Heathcliff, a romantic hero who defies everyone and everything in pursuit of his own money and love. Heathcliff and Catherine grew up together and love each other. Catherine gets married to another man for more stability than wild romance with Heathcliff. This becomes the central conflict of the story. Heathcliff decides he needs to be wealthy to get revenge, so he schemes against everyone to accumulate his wealth. But his love for Catherine is so intense that people witness their ghosts around the area for generations that come after them. A side note, I read a novel by a Venezuelan author, Romello Gallegos, Donna Barbara, which has a female character that resembles Heathcliff and her wildness and ruthless approach to get rich and men. Emily Bronte's masterpiece depicts the intensity and darkness of human passion, the wild side of human heart, the irrational side of existence. At the time in England and Europe, a movement had begun against too much industrializations. Poets like Lord Byron, Wordsworth, Coleridge, and Shelley were part of a romantic movement that wanted to return to the country life, to the wild. This was in response to machines and factories ruining the landscape of Europe with noise and smoke. Charlotte Bronte's Jane Eyre is an optimistic novel, while Emily Bronte's Wuthering Heights is darker, more pessimistic, but it's also more profound. Great Expectations by Charles Dickens. Dickens wrote about poverty, growing up, and social mobility in England. Great Expectations is one of his best novels. It's about Pip, a young orphan boy living with his unmarried sister who treats him very rough. One day at a graveyard, he meets an escaping convict, and this encounter changes the young boy's life forever. Then there's the old woman, Miss Havisham, who hates men. At her house, Pip falls in love with a girl, Stella, but she's cold, very cold. Years pass, and one day he is told to quit his blacksmith job and move to London to become a gentleman, due to the money he receives from an unknown patron. It's a kind of fairy tale of colonialism, but it's not your ordinary fairy tale, it's a colonial fairy tale. His patron turns out to be this convict who made his fortune in Australia. With this shocking revelation, his dreams start tumbling down as the man is arrested and his fortunes confiscated. Pip's great expectations turn to small expectations and many misfortunes and many lucky escapes. But life goes on and he trudges along. He finally makes a man of himself by working hard and manages to have a son of his own. At the end, he manages to meet his first love, Stella, again and for a happy ending. There is much in this novel to talk about, but one thing caught my attention. British men at the time made their fortunes abroad. Pip makes his money in Egypt. The convict makes his money in Australia. However, Dickens doesn't talk about how they make money. I guess thanks to colonialism. I love Great Expectation. It's my favorite novel by Dickens. Middlemarch by George Eliot. George Eliot lived between 1819 and 1880, exactly around the same time as Dostoevsky. Her real name was Mary Ann Evans. Middlemarch is a beast of a novel, not an easy one. It has so many subplots and stories that run parallel to one another that Virginia Woolf called it a novel for grown-ups, or those with intellectual muscles. Set in a fictional town of Middlemarch in Midlands, England. It tells a few stories, but the main plot centers on Dorothea Brooke, a bright young woman who marries a clergyman much older so she can showcase her talent as an intelligent woman. But their marriage is unhappy. When her husband dies, Dorothea marries a more average man and becomes more of a wife than a woman of intellect. It somewhat mirrors George Eliot's own life. Dorothea marries up but doesn't get any respect, then marries an average man, she is content. Similarly in Jane Eyre, Jane marries the high-status man only after his crippling injury, not when he was its full power. Perhaps it suggests that alpha women hardly marry alpha men. Some criticize George Eliot for that ending. Despite the criticism, George Eliot had an optimistic view of Industrial Revolution. Many male authors saw it as destroying nature and beauty, but George Eliot saw the change brought more opportunities for women to move out of fixed traditions and exercise some intellectual maneuvering. Middlemarch on a whole sounds a bit boring, but its psychological depth is what makes it a masterpiece. Tess of D'Urbervilles by Thomas Hardy. Unlike George Eliot, Thomas Hardy had a very pessimistic view of industrialization and urbanization. Instead, he sets his novel in the countryside. Tess of D'Urbervilles is set in a fictional Wessex in England. The female protagonist, Tess, discovers that her family name, D'Urbervilles, might be of a higher class or nobility. Faced with much poverty and adversity, Tess decides to find out about her family's possible fortune. So she visits a mansion belonging to some rich D'Urbervilles. She meets a young D'Urberville named Alec, who finds Tess very attractive, so he gives her a job. Then one night, Alec rapes Tess. Tess returns home and gives birth to a boy who dies soon after. Years pass and she finds another job as a milkwoman and meets another man, Angel Clare, and they fall in love. When he proposes marriage, Tess is torn, but decides to hide the fact that she's not a virgin. On their wedding night, she confesses that she's not a virgin. They walk separate ways. Angel Clare goes to Brazil and Tess back to her parents' home, and her life turns far worse. Meanwhile, Alec becomes a religious priest, which is a trick to win Tess again. His pursuit is refused, but time passes and Angel Clare returns to find that Tess has given in to Alec's pursuit. Tess is so torn that she takes matters into her own hands and decides revenge on Alec, who had ruined her life. She kills Alec and then flees with Angel Clare. The ending is quite sad, but also beautiful, as the couple escapes from the police and spend the night in Stonehenge. But freedom is short-lived. She is arrested and sent to jail. It's a novel of bad luck and suffering. I guess you can't change your fate. This shows Thomas Hardy's pessimism. The writing is beautiful, especially the description of country life. Nature represents innocence unspoiled, while money represents corruption. The poor Tess is a symbol of purity, and the rich Alex is a symbol of corruption. It's a beautifully written novel that breaks your heart. The Moon and Sixpence by Somerset Maugham. Charles Strickland, the protagonist of The Moon and Sixpence, is an English stockbroker with wife and kids, but one day decides to leave everyone behind and move to Paris. The story is based on the life of French artist Paul Gauguin, who abandoned his family and moved to Tahiti. There's also a Dutch painter called Dirk Stroeve, perhaps Vincent van Gogh, who was friends with Gauguin. In Paris, the protagonist betrays his friend by sleeping with his wife, who in turn commits suicide after dealing with Strickland's destructive personality and his mad pursuit of art. He later moves to Tahiti and takes native women who don't ask him questions and puts up with his madness and selfishness. There, Strickland dies but also produces some of his greatest paintings. The novel is about the madness of a single-minded artist who damages so many people who come in contact with him. The reason I love this novel is the escape element, to leave everyone and everything behind. I think many people fantasize to run away from it all. Maybe it's just me. Another thing I loved about this novel is its so beautiful description of the paintings mentioned. In fact, I looked up Paul Gauguin's paintings to try to match the one described here. It's a really short novella, but packed with so much insight and psychological detail into the mind of an artist. Mrs. Dalloway by Virginia Woolf. A few things you should know about Virginia Woolf. She had Indian heritage, she was inspired by Henri Bergson, the French philosopher of time, and she committed suicide by drowning herself. She wrote novels in the mold of psychological depth of Marcel Proust and stream of consciousness of James Joyce. Mrs. Dalloway is her best work. The entire novel takes place in one day in the 1920s in the life of a high-class English woman, Mrs. Dalloway, as she prepares for an evening party at her house. Just like in Proust's novel In Search of Lost Time, as she moves about her day, her memories are triggered by things she notices. She remembers her youth, her marriage, and life's choices. It's also like James Joyce's Ulysses, which also takes place in one day in Dublin in a kind of stream of consciousness. In Mrs. Dalloway, there's also a shell-shocked war veteran who is treated for his trauma. Mrs. Dalloway and the soldier live very different lives and aren't aware of each other. One hates life, the other loves it. One remembers her past with pleasant feelings, and the other is terrified of his past. Later at the party, Mrs. Dalloway learns that the soldier has committed suicide. Memory of the past is central in this novel, just like in Proust's novel. The sharp focus on the present, one day in particular, suggests that Virginia Woolf tries to tell that time is not broken down between past, present, future, but all the past is also in the present. Time is not a unit, but duration. Time is elastic and it stretches. Animal Farm by George Orwell. Animal Farm is about a revolution gone wrong. Instead of liberating them, the revolution simply replaces old masters with new ones. The story is about a group of animals who rise up against their human owner and take control of the farm. It's an allegory of the October Revolution in Russia, in which the socialists took power from the Tsar. Soon there's a disagreement between the leaders of the revolution, and one bloody end for one and a triumph for the other. As time passes, the farm becomes more and more authoritarian. At the end, the leaders of the farm behave just like the human owners prior to the revolution. Now, the animals are not exploited by humans, but by some other animals. It's a very pessimistic view of socio-political revolutions, namely an allegory of the USSR, but also a hint that the Indian independence movement, which Orwell was against, even if India took power, the lives of ordinary Indians wouldn't improve. I have dedicated a whole video on George Orwell's novels, philosophy, and criticism, so if you haven't watched it, I highly recommend you watch it. But I think Animal Farm is superior in being more innovative, funnier, and better story than 1984. I explain it in more detail in my video, 10 Lessons from George Orwell. The Golden Notebook by Doris Lessing. Doris Lessing was born in modern-day Zimbabwe and was the oldest person to win the Nobel Prize in Literature in 2007. The Golden Notebook is her best novel. What is it about? Well, to understand the plot, let's talk about modernity. Modern humans are pulled in all directions, fragmented and all over the place. So how you keep it all together, stay in control to form a uniformed identity? That's the question the Golden Notebook tries to answer. Anna, the protagonist of the novel, has 4 notebooks in which she writes about her life. The black notebook is about her past life in Africa, the yellow notebook about her romantic life, the red notebook about her political life and membership to the Communist Party, the blue notebook about her personal diary. Since these 4 notebooks are all over the place, she decides on a 5th notebook, the Golden Notebook, to tie all together. Some people suggest this is a feminist novel about the frustration of women still struggling to be liberated. But for me, despite the novel's protagonist being a female, it depicts the struggle of any modern human. In the olden past, everyone had fixed identity that was either tied to their social status, family, or land. You would live your entire life in the same village, same family, and same identity. When modernity showed up, we were told to form our own identity and world as a place of overwhelming possibilities. This confused, overwhelmed, and pulled us in different directions. So Doris Lessing is trying to depict these fragmentations of the self. The Remains of the Day by Kazuo Ishiguro. Kazuo Ishiguro was born in 1954 in Japan, and his parents moved to England when he was 5 years old. He won the Nobel Prize in Literature in 2017. He's one of my favorite novelists, and I have dedicated a whole video on his novel, style of writing, and how he compares with Murakami. You can watch it here. Ishiguro's best novel is Remains of the Day, which won him the Man Booker Prize in 1989. Stephen, a butler, tells his own story in an English aristocrat's house while taking a road trip to see a woman who he had romantic feelings some 40 years ago in the 1930s. His purpose for the road trip is to see if she's interested in him under the guise of trying to recruit her for a job. But it's a romantic quest when both are in their old age. It appears she had feelings for him too when they were both young, but now she is married and is happy with her husband. At the time, Stevens ignored her, sacrificed his romance to dedicate his life for his job. But now it's too late and she has moved on. At the end, there's a very moving scene. Stephen sits on an empty bench gazing at the ocean and suddenly tears rolling down his cheeks. You can feel that the emotions he had kept all those years, all his life for the sake of professionalism and dignity were coming out now. For Ishiguro, silent suffering is central to all his novels. The Buddhist theme in accepting one's fate is very strong in his novels. Putting up with hardship of life is as heroic as trying to change things. Western mentality is based on progress, constant battle to improve, change, and transform the environment. But Ishiguro's characters try to put up and accept their fate. Okay, now let me tell you some interesting things about English literature. As you can see, women's presence is very prominent in English literature. Out of 10, 5 are women. This is not the case in most countries. My only explanation is that in 18th and 19th centuries, British men were busy conquering the world, running an empire and sending loads of cash home so that the English women stayed behind and lived comfortable life in England. With the miserable English weather, what can you do? Except read and write, of course. Most of these women were well off, but not part of the aristocracy, so they had a financial freedom without class restrictions. Most of them were daughters of priests like Jane Austen, Bronte sisters, and George Eliot. Therefore had access to education without the aristocratic baggage. Aristocrats like Lord Byron had to run away to be able to express themselves freely. Today, like Meghan and Harry, escaped to America to talk freely. Even today, the majority of readers, publishers, and recently most authors with prizes are women, according to the Guardian newspaper. Men, they tend to work long hours, play sports, and play video games. Another interesting thing you notice is the empire and colonialism in the background. None of the novels really deal with it directly, but only uses colonialism as a prop. It's out there. Men disappear from the pages of these novels to go to Africa, Australia, Asia, or South America and suddenly come back very rich.